This is Dan Schneider on this Dan Schneider video interview, and it's another of my interviews on people with interesting websites and or YouTube channels and or any other channels. I'm speaking with Jason Martin from Wrong Enough to Know Better, and the conversation will begin in a moment. Wrong Enough to Know Better is a YouTube channel that started a year or so ago. I am going to be speaking with its host and operator, Jason Martin. Welcome, Jason. As I like to do, I want to give people a few minutes to talk a little bit about themselves, who they are, why they're here, etc. So if you can just give a little précis of who you are.
Well, I'm Jason, and I run the channel Wrong Enough to Know Better. And sorry to correct you on this, but I've only been at Wrong Enough to Know Better for, I think, just under 6 months now.
Okay.
And that's okay because that is a huge part of the story. YouTube has always been something that interested me, and this has become my full-time job. We'll get to that. But I always wanted to do creative things, the fantasy in life of making a documentary and that sort of arts side of the world. And as far as YouTube went, I always wanted to do things that brought happiness and beauty and joy to the world. I was in India, and I had left just before your last election in 2024, and things got a little heated between our countries. And I was overseas. My wife was here at home all alone, and I was supposed to be in India for a few more months. And because of threats of annexation and stuff like that, I came back to Canada to be with my wife. And I had also been upset that the last time Donald Trump was president, that I hadn't documented as I went along, like as we went through the whole experience, because there are all the little things that you forget that ever happened. So I had some physical limitations. I have like physical limitations now that I didn't have before. I can't go back to being a trucker. That's off the table. So YouTube was the obvious solution. And because of the way my interest in politics and society and culture, it just seemed like the natural path to go. And so I've been doing this channel for, well, since February, middle of February, and it's been remarkable. Like, it has been a roller coaster ride of epic proportions. So I don't know if that really tells you a whole lot. I mean, we could go into details about where my belief systems come from and stuff like that, but that is who I am at the moment.
Well, let me just ask you, because you're one of the few people that I've interviewed that comes from a blue collar background like myself. I work in retail. I've had a couple of hernias. I've constantly got pulled this and pulled that, lifting. I mean, I'm 60 years old, but I outwork kids 30 years my junior, 35 years my junior, and but it takes a toll on the body. So you spoke about being injured. You were a trucker. Were you a long haul trucker?
Yeah, I was a long haul trucker, yeah. And so I wasn't injured. What happened was I have arthritis in my spine. And, it slowly progressed over a very long period of time. And then one day my left foot stopped working. And I had paralysis. And so I do have use of that foot, probably 90% recovered, though I'm in a high risk for it to return because there was no medical intervention. Like, there's not really much they can do for that necessarily. So it's not money or access to healthcare as much as, like, this is just what happens when you get old.
Yeah.
So that's what sort of pulled me out of the blue collar life.
So here in America, there's a kind of condescension that people who go to college have towards physical labor, blue collar labor. We see it with the whole migrant thing here in this country. Who's going to pick the goddamn tomatoes, that everyone wants? But I've always found it particularly noxious because, like I said, I'm an artist, so I like having my mind free, being able to do something rote that I can, even as I'm working, doing lifting, baling, whatever. My mind is wandering and scouring and picking up things that I can use in a story or a poem or a play or whatever it might be. Is there the same kind of sort of looking down the nose kind of thing in Canada towards the blue collar?
I would say definitely much less so.
Yeah.
And that has to do with some core fundamental cultural differences between Canada and the United States.
Mm.
We don't invite immigrants, we are immigrants, right? So there's a huge cultural difference that underlies society when you look at it like that. So a lot of people, when they first come to Canada, are learning the language, learning the culture, and generally have to start at the bottom. There are, plenty of people who come here, as doctors who, start at Tim Hortons because they don't have the credentials here yet and they need to get by. And so almost everyone at some point in their life does blue collar work and understands the value of it. Mm. Whereas in the United States, it's much more of you're born into a family where you will go and you will get an education and your family has connections, or via some fraternity or something like this, you will have connections so that you will never sweat over a grill.
Yeah.
Right? And there's far less of that in Canada.
Okay.
Far less.
So was your family from the Manitoba area, or are you yourself just based in Winnipeg?
I am first generation. So I was technically, there's nothing technical. I was born in Toronto. Uh-huh. And my parents were migrants. They were hippies and we were migrants. I didn't have a permanent home until I was about 7 years old. And then when we did settle down here in Winnipeg, because Winnipeg is basically somewhere between the Detroit or Flint, Michigan of Canada. Yeah. Highest poverty rates, highest crime rates, but also, one of the more beautiful things is the highest number of immigrants per capita. So we are vastly more cultural than a lot of other places. And that reflects our music and our arts and our culture. So there are downsides here. But so anyway, my family came to Winnipeg in the mid-late 1970s, and my parents ran a halfway house, and we lived in that for 5 years. So first, I was a child of hippies, and we, traveled across the country, freewheeling, living out of tents and trucks and blah, blah, blah. And then when we did settle down, we settled down in a house where the average stay for a guy was about 6 months. And there were 10 to 12 guys in the house at any given time. So I never stopped traveling because there was no permanence in that home. Hmm. We stayed, but the people in it were always shifting. So, and there were a number of really good lessons that I learned living in that halfway house as a kid. Not foremost being, you can never judge a person by their worst moment. That, we all make mistakes, and some of us just have to pay a bigger price for it. And some of us, as your president proves, don't have to pay a price at all. So,
two things regarding the hippie thing. number one, it's interesting. I grew up with Great Depression era parents. My dad was born in 1916, my mom in 1922. My dad had served in the Civilian Conservation Corps, which was a great FDR program here in the U.S. during the Great Depression. My mother had actually gone to college and business school back in the 1930s, decades before women did such things. But I was instilled with that Great Depression thing. I'm assuming that you had a similar installation from your parents with regarding hippie values. And I bring this up because I did a couple of shows less than a year or so ago on why the hippies were right on so many things, but didn't leave much of a lasting legacy here in the U.S. It's now become a joke to call someone a hippie. So as someone who's the child of hippies, what was your growing up like, and what was hippies like in Canada, I guess, too? Because we know the U.S. hippie here.
I think there were probably great similarities between the two, more similarities than differences. I mean, keep in mind that we were also, at that time, Canada, we had like refugees from the United States.
Yeah.
We had all the draft dodgers. Like we have, a coast of our country is a generation of draft dodgers and their children, grandchildren.
When I was 6 or 7 years old in the early 70s, my dad was making plans for me to get out of the country in case to avoid the draft.
Yeah, well, absolutely, and so I think that okay, so here's my assessment on hippies. Most of them, I would say, their values were in the right place. Some of them were contradictions in that they could say something, they could believe something, but they didn't know how to enact it. And so, in my in my family situation, my father talked a lot of the words. My mother lived the words. Mm. So every ounce of compassion I have, every ounce of understanding I have, any bit of sensitivity I have, all came from my mother. And not because she told me, but because she showed me every day for her entire life, right? And then there's other aspects, like we talk about the failings, and we kind of laugh because the hippies became the yuppies, and the yuppies destroyed the planet, But having said that, I mean, even when I look at what, I'm more than happy to call the collapse of the United States and capitalism at the moment, it's protracted because it starts, somewhere in the 1950s and comes to now. And really what it is if you look at the statistics of what percentage of people who win the lottery go bankrupt,
yeah.
It's a huge number. It's ridiculous that like you could win millions and millions and millions of dollars and then a few years later be bankrupt. Well, I think the same thing happened with them. They won the lottery. They were in the most poised generation to have absolute opulence and wealth. And they went bankrupt because they didn't know what to do with it, which is this same problem as lottery winners. So a lot of people want to blame the hippie generation for, the baby boomers, for all that is wrong right now. But the reality is they just didn't know how to do better. Yeah.
So here in the U.S., as bad as Trump is, and he's the worst president in my country's history, I think the thing where things turned in the U.S. was actually Reagan. Now, people might argue Nixon, but for all of his flaws, which were many, and he's arguably the most corrupt president before Trump, he actually was an intelligent guy, and he actually had some good social programs. He was pro-science. He was, these kinds of things. He had some good domestic programs. To me, where the U.S.
Sorry, Nixon or Reagan?
Nixon. Where we went wrong was Reagan, and you had Maggie Thatcher in the U.K. Was there any? Who was the equivalent? Was it Pierre Trudeau? I mean, he's the only guy I knew who was the prime minister from back when I was a kid. But was there a similar right-wing turn in the Canadian psyche, the way it was in the UK and the US?
Definitely, no, not Pierre. Pierre was a very unifying factor for our country because in the early 1970s, there was the FLQ, which were the separatist movement
Yeah.
of Quebec.
Yeah.
And it wasn't a game like, we're talking the Irish Troubles level of there were bombings regularly and stuff like this from the separatist movement. And Pierre Elliott Trudeau sort of balanced the country out because he's obviously French. So he was really good at unifying the country. Where things went down, because typically Canada is always 5 or 10 years behind the United States. So where it really happened was post post Reagan, like end of Reagan era. Then we switched to being conservative, which you would call Republican. So our government goes in that direction. Now, granted, it's never to the extreme that the United States goes,
Yeah.
but the Overton window just shifts over time. So while the Reagan Thatcher era was going on, values were changing in Canada as well. And then, we adopt a government that moves more in that direction. I mean, it's so ridiculous because those shifts that all felt substantial at the time look so minuscule now compared to what's going on these days that, you're talking about the difference between Reagan and Nixon. The difference between the two of them is almost indistinguishable compared to the level of what's going on now, right? And Nixon was responsible for the EPA.
Yeah.
And he may not have spearheaded a lot of the good things that happened, civil rights movement and stuff like that, but he didn't fight it the way that others would have. I mean, his biggest flaw was, trying to have a cover up.
So let's talk about the channel. What is the genesis for the channel? So you're home. You've got these physical ills. Was it just that you thought, well, maybe I could make some money? And I noticed the focus tends to be more on the things that are the U.S. Is your channel more directed towards the U.S. than it is for its home country?
Well, it's definitely not directed towards Canada.
Yeah.
I think the thing is that I'm just, because I said, it's been since middle of February, I had initially thought that it would be much more of a political commentary channel, which thankfully it's not. But it was very quick that I realized that you actually have to have a subscriber base to have a political commentary channel. Otherwise, you make a video, five people will watch it, and then by the time anyone else sees it, it's already irrelevant. And that was probably all of this is a learning experience. But now I've gotten to the point where I've pretty much figured out what the channel is. It's not there yet, and it's more that it's a political and social commentary, hopefully focused on present versus historical analysis. But what I really want from each and every video is that no matter how boring the subject is, that the viewer walks away feeling that they gained some value or deeper understanding of what's going on culturally. So it's still kind of figuring itself out, but I'm finding my place.
YouTube tends to reward sameness. What I often found, and this is the thing for the future, is you don't want to just constantly be chasing the same algorithm. This is why I only get a few hundred views per interview, is because I'll do a show on science, I'll do a show on pop culture, I'll do a show with a YouTuber like you, I'll do a show on something with, you know, some social scientist or some book or whatnot. And so it's all over the place. But that's just the way I am, and I'm not going to change for anyone. I'm not looking to make money. In looking to make money, though, for yourself, do you have a core? I mean, you said it's evolving, but is there like a core principle or mission statement that you have?
On a monetary sense, no, absolutely not. Like, I, as, okay, as a foundation, the channel has exceeded all of, not just all of my expectations, but it's exceeding track records for millions of channels. Like, I have not sought out any viewers, so I haven't paid for any advertising or anything like that. It has been 100% organic growth. I got my first 1,000 subscribers within 90 days of starting the channel. Monetization was a little screwy, and it took a couple of months longer than that, but really just a month longer. Complicated story. So, I mean, I've broken all sorts of YouTube records, but part of it is intentional in the context of I'm making videos. Yes, I want people to watch it. But thankfully, people actually seem to want to hear a bit of what I have to say. So, you know, in the 6 months-ish or 5 months-ish, I'm up to 12,500 subscribers, you know, and I'm starting to see lots of views, you know, like getting 30,000 views in a couple of days of being published, which for a YouTuber my size is amazing, and given my time frame. But the monetary side of it, like, yes, I want to eat. We all want to eat. You know, I had someone comment the other day, you know, my buy me a coffee on my channel is I'm fundraising for going back to India. You know, and so somebody commented, oh, you know, he's vlogging videos to get a free trip to India. And it's like, no, I'm showing up to work and I would like to go back to India. You know, you don't go to work and not get a paycheck, you know, so I would like to get a paycheck at some point. But nothing is driven by monetary reasons, because I realized a couple of months ago when the channel was really starting to grow, and I could see all of the analytics behind YouTube. It's just like kind of revealing, pulling the curtains off and letting us see what really goes on. How easy it is for YouTubers to see what words to say, when to say them, how to say them, all this sort of stuff, so that they could manipulate people into watching longer, more people to subscribe. And I could see how easy it is to go down that rabbit hole and like keep pumping out the same thing time and time again, just for the number of views you get. And that's not my interest in the slightest.
So you mentioned your mother and her living her values. Were you born in a religious household? Was it ecumenical? Where does your values system as a person in this world come from?
I come from a Irish Catholic traumatized family. I don't know if you know much about the Irish Catholic boarding school system in the 40s, 50s, 60s.
The Magdalene Sisters, that the movie, it was a well-known movie. I see.
It's you know, there were horrible things that happened at the hands of people you should have trusted, and my father was a victim of that. So there was no religion in my house, though. You know, every couple of years, my parents would let me know if, you know, you want to go to any kind of church or anything like that. That's your call. It's cool. I'll take you to one if you need, but like we're not going out of our own interest here. So no, there was no Christianity, there was no Buddhism, no Hinduism, no nothing.
Jason, let me ask you about some left-leaning YouTubers and whether you watch them or not. Because one of the things I've found is I was a working class Democrat. I'm an independent, and that's because I have as much disdain for the Democratic Party here in this country that I always say the Democrats stand for nothing, the Republicans stand for evil. And given a choice between nothing and something, most people are going to choose the something, even if it's bad for them. But I really, ever since Trump got reelected, I've really been angered at some of the left wing YouTube sites where you'll see, bombshell hits Trump, but Trump still succeeds on the issue. This Trump rocked, and they're acting as if there isn't this steady push where they're losing ground for some mythic thing, or they look to someone like a Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, who's a real piece of shit in my estimation, just like Kamala Harris, a black woman who ran for president but was for slavery in using prisoners and not paying for them. So let me just well, first off, do you actually watch any of the, I guess you call the left wing or liberal commentators on YouTube?
It's painful. Yes, but I do. I mean, I guess there's a fundamental issue there, which is that the United States has no left wing. So, just for absolute clarity, the two parties that you have one that is like far right wing fascist authoritarian party, and you have one right of center party, we'll say. But there is no left wing. There are, granted, 3 or 4 people within the Democratic Party who are left wing, and then there's Bernie, who's obviously left wing. But on a whole, there is no left wing party in the United States, and that's the misconception. And I think that, your feelings about the Democratic Party are what is actually growing now within left-wing people in the United States, is they're realizing that the Democratic Party isn't left-wing, has not been left-wing in decades, if they ever were, and that something has to change. Like, you can't vote in Obama for universal health care and then settle the second he says, yeah, but we don't want to push this too hard, so we're going to settle for just something that appeases the masses. Like, what happened to universal health care?
Yeah, well,
why is minimum wage still $7 an hour?
Yeah, it's actually 7.25, they'd say. But the thing is, like, he didn't even stand up for card check. But the thing that gets me, especially about someone like Bernie Sanders, is in 2016 he won the state of West Virginia. He won every county. He didn't get a single goddamn caucus member for the Democratic caucus. In 2020 he ran again. He could have put a big hurt in what the Democrats need. They need to be shattered into 1,000 little pieces and reform into something better, like in that Terminator 2 movie where the Terminator can get back into something. But then he gave up again. So for me, Bernie is not just a 2-time loser. He gave up twice. All the high-flying rhetoric, here's the thing, you can say all the right things, but when the shit hits the fan, you have to stand for it. And Bernie took his cards, as the old country song says, and he folded. And to me, that's how can you trust someone like him? I don't know.
Okay. 2 points. We're going to quickly go back to the left-wing commentators. First off, when it comes to them, they're coming from my perspective, from a right-wing perspective, with some left-leaning tendencies. So it's a little bit irritating that way because they think they're very progressive and they're not necessarily. And then the other aspect is what I had said before about how when we do YouTube, we can see the algorithm. We know how to feed the monster if we want to. And every video that I see by these people that are 15, 20 minutes long every single day, and like honestly, they could have squeezed everything they said into 3 minutes.
Yeah.
Like my videos are about 8 to 12 minutes long, and I want them to mean something. I want every word of my videos to mean something. That is not how you make money on YouTube. like,
Yeah.
and so, so you see that they're just feeding the monster. And so I get that that's the progressive voice for the left in the United States, but it isn't as progressive people think, and a lot of it is just algorithm feeding. But back to Bernie.
Okay.
When it comes to Bernie, I disagree for a couple of reasons. Because first off, Bernie ran in the 2015 primaries when he was running to be the president or the leader of the Democratic Party. He was squeezed out by the DNC. That is what won Donald Trump the election.
Oh, absolutely. I agree. The DNC, like the DLC before it, absolute scumbags. I mean, I have no love for them.
Yeah, and so so then you get into a deeper fundamental issue about the United States, where you start talking about some sort of political reformation. And so here's the difference between Canada and the United States. And there are obviously flaws within our political electoral system as well, because there just is. You can't please millions and millions of people with one standard format. But your system is binary. And there is no incentive to improve when you have a binary system.
Yeah.
So, whereas in Canada, we have this, generally speaking, not unfortunately in this government, but most of our governments have quite a bit of diversity. And so, when we had Justin Trudeau, his government was held together by two different parties. It was held together by his party, which was the largest party in the House, but not enough to hold government, and the NDP, the New Democratic Party, which is the left-leaning party. And he only needed, 7 or 8 of them to form government. But what that meant was the left, as small as the party was, had a voice in policy, because they could say, yes, we will back you on 95% of your policies, but you have to do these policies for us. And so what you wind up having is conversations, people crossing the aisle. And that doesn't happen in the United States anymore, And so, but because it's binary, you have to choose which evil is better.
Well, I vote third party. I made a mistake twice voting for Obama because I was suckered and thought maybe a black man might have more empathy for the lower classes and whatnot. But I was wrong. And I fully admit that. So I'm not saying I don't own a part of the disaster in this nation. But I'll have to tell you, I voted like 3 times for Ralph Nader when he ran on the Green Party. And the problem here in the U.S. is the third parties are a joke. They put up people who, couldn't even, run a lemonade stand. And if you want to see something funny, look back around 2020. If you want to scroll through my Cosmoetica YouTube channel, I did 5 or 6 interviews with third-party candidates in 2020. The guy I wanted to vote for, Mark Charles, an American Indian running for president, I interviewed him. Really smart guy, never held office, but I couldn't even do a write-in vote here in Texas because that would have made my ballot ineligible to actually write in a write-in candidate. So I voted for this woman, Gloria La Riva, instead. But I interviewed a couple of other people. They were interesting, nice people. I interviewed a guy from the Prohibition Party. Still exists here in the U.S. The Prohibition Party. If you wanna wet your pants, watch this interview. It is the most bizarre. It's like speaking to someone from the outer limits of Pluto or something.
Yeah.
But and this is so we have a totally evil party. We have a party that has no principles whatsoever in the Democrat, and then we have this gaggle of third parties that the best of them in terms electorally, the Libertarians, who are nothing but a bunch of corporate whores. The Libertarians get maybe 2%. So
Yeah.
people, it's such a terrible, it's the illusion of choice, as a lot of people have said. There is no real choice. It's the illusion of choice that they give us here, because they have so commoditized, they have so corporatized, they have so made us into consumers here, that if you're not a consumer, you're the idiot.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I guess, it boils down to you're never going to get the elected people to enact the electoral reform that needs to happen. It's as simple as that. Like, I mean, it's the fact that you, and Canada as well, we don't have an option on the ballot to say they all suck.
Yeah.
Like, I want to vote, but I'm not being offered anyone that I would actually vote for. Like, just that rejection to say, I am willing to go out of my way just to say you all suck. So even if you win the election, if 50% of the electorate says you are all scum, I don't like any of you. So don't think that your policies are backed by some majority that, they aren't. You could cause a revolution. There's enough of us.
Yeah, I would. For example, the New York City election that they had with this Zoran Mamdani. Now, he has to run as a Democrat. He has about as much in common with the typical Democrat in New York as, he would with someone running in Nepal. But they have to try to fit them in. It's just a terrible thing. I wanted, though to ask you, to get back to the left YouTube establishment,
Okay.
if you will. The person, I mean, there's a number of them that to me, they're just like college frat boys. There's one or two that I'll listen to a bit more because they don't have corporate sponsorships. But the guy who annoys the piss out of me is this guy named David Pakman, because this is a guy who claims to be a left winger or whatnot. But when the Gaza war started or whatnot, he couldn't get off the fence. He was on the fence about a genocide. And it's interesting because just like with a lot of the networks here in the U.S., it's 2 years later. There's still only 40,000 people have died, whereas people from the UN and other independent agencies have said it's between 400 and 500,000. And it's like, this is so obviously a genocide. These people, Trump and Genocide Joe, if I had the power, send him to The Hague, put him on trial, sit him in the same booth while Eichmann sat.
You know what? Okay, so when it comes to him, the thing I will say, I don't like him either, but this is exactly what I'm talking about a binary system.
Yeah.
So you have this entire group that considers themselves to be left-wing, but that's their thought process. Like, they don't see it as a genocide because it's complicated. Because in American culture, American propaganda, particularly, more specifically, you're told it's complicated.
Yeah.
You can't possibly understand the whole thing. It's like, there's not a whole lot to understand. They were robbed of their land, squished into a private cell, had walls built around them. They rebelled. What did you expect? Now you're just killing them all.
Yeah.
And calling it a war. Like, it's not a war when you have like one side that has no means by which to defend themselves.
Yeah. See, when I argue with people, and I hate when they try to say it's anti-Semitism. If the bully is Jewish, it's a bully. That's not a get out of jail free card. Because your great grandfather died in Bergen-Belsen doesn't mean you have a right to do something where you're shooting 5-year-old kids who are battling over scraps in the sand. It doesn't take more than a 5-minute search to see that the ancestors of Arabs, for example, have been in the Levant for about 60,000 years. Jews as a people formed or were recognized as a separate identity about 4,000 years ago. Yeah. Then they were taken off into Persia, and was it Cyrus the Great released them? Then the diaspora across the world, and in 2,000 years they come back 130 years ago. And that's when the trouble begins, at least between the Jews and the Muslims. Not that the Middle East was ever a great place to live. There was constant warfare and whatnot between the various tribes. But I mean,
Yeah.
this doesn't, you don't have, it's not like you have to look up in an Encyclopedia Britannica and have to research it for 6 months. The stuff is available in 5 minutes if you just click.
Well, and I'm going to say, like, all of that history means nothing. Like, and I know that like a lot that would upset a lot of people. But the thing is that Israel exists. That's not going to change. Whether you like it, whether I like it, whether some anti-Semite likes it or not, Israel exists. What has Israel done to, I mean, frankly, most Arabs would be happy if they just left them alone. But what have they done to improve these people's lives? To say, you know what? Yes, we stole your land, but here we are. How can we cohabitate? Like, and that's what hasn't happened. Instead, Israel has taken the genocide approach, and it's just not complicated. I will say, so the dynamic shift here is that with all of the tariffs and threats of annexation and all this sort of stuff, and making Canada's relationship with the United States less important. I mean, now Canada as a nation is acknowledging the state of Palestine, which it should have done a long time ago. And, it's the combination of we now have a prime minister who has, a certain set of values. And frankly, we don't really give a two flying about whether or not the U.S. president approves of us doing it or not. So
I often speak with young people who contact me to show me their work or whatnot. And about 7 years ago, this young girl from Ireland contacted me, and she lived in a country where abortion was outlawed and the U.S. abortion was legal. Now it's reversed. And so where does Canada stand on the abortion issue, or is it an issue in your country?
Not an issue. Like, every November, the religious people let their freak flags fly. And, they go to the hospitals and hold their little picket signs, pray for life or whatever it is that they say. And then they're done till next year. And it's just, we've had conservative governments who wouldn't dare touching it because socially we have agreed that this is it. Yes, there is a percentage that disagree with it, but they will never be the majority. So it's just not even something that's discussed.
I know about 40 years ago, back in the 80s, there was a young girl that I knew that I escorted her to an abortion clinic. She was a runaway prostitute, and it wasn't my fetus, but I escorted her, and I remember these people protesting. This is 82, 83 maybe, and the thing, as we were coming out, this big fat guy ran up the stairs of the building to try like throw ketchup on this girl, meaning blood, that she had blood on her hands or whatnot. I remember, even as a teenager, I just sort of like stuck my boot up in his face, and he fell back and whatnot. And the thing that over the years that I've wondered, and maybe you can tell me if it's this way in Canada, is people who are on the left, the thing that annoys me the most probably is that they don't realize that we live in a world where people will kill you just for being different. They have this idea that everything can be solved with just a good argument or whatnot, and unfortunately, that's not so. Sometimes, if you have a 45-year-old man at the time trying to assault a young girl who's coming out of an abortion clinic by throwing ketchup on her, sometimes a boot to the face is the only answer. What is your take on that personally, and how is the Canadian ethos in that kind of a situation?
I'm kind of curious as to what angle you're coming at from that question, because are you saying that like that is the way the world is, or that's the way that the United States is?
Well, sometimes there, I would say it's the world. I mean, again, with what's a Gazan to do when the IDF is coming to hunt down their children? I mean, unfortunately, we live in a world where where sometimes you
Yes, there
just
are.
can't talk.
Yeah.
You know,
There are certain extremes, definitely, but I don't think the vast majority of the world lives in that heightened state of awareness because it's just not a reality. Like, you know, um, there is serious violence in the United States. Like, you have a 3,200% more chance of being involved in a mass shooting in the United States than you do in Canada. So, am I going to live with a heightened state of fear about somebody might have a gun? No, never. Not at all.
and
You know?
and
And so, this is not to say that violent things don't happen. I spent 13 years as a taxi driver in the poorest neighborhood of one of the poorest cities in Canada. Um, I'm super capable of taking care of myself. Not that not that I flex that, but I'm not going to let somebody like threaten me and get away with it. I'm not going to pound them, but I'm going to let them know that they don't scare me just because they threaten me. So, but the difference is here, somebody does that and you stand up for yourself. That's kind of the end of it. Whereas, in the United States, that can still escalate.
yeah. So, since Trump has installed his ridiculous on and off tariff stuff, what has been the Canadian response in terms of politically by the government and by the people? Because I work in a supermarket. Despite what you hear said, stuff is now more expensive in the last 6 months than it was under Biden. And all of this goes back to the fact that we have this so-called laissez-faire capitalism. Unless the corporations are losing money, then they all become socialists and want bailouts. But all of the price rises, 100% due to the money that they lost during the COVID era. They jack things up 10%, then another 10%, then another 10%. Oh, it's the price of gas. No, it's not the price of gas. Gas is what it was 4 or 5 years ago. Oh, it's supply chain issues. No, that's not. It's all bullshit, and it's such easily seen through bullshit. How has the Trump and all this post COVID stuff affected you guys economically?
Okay, post-COVID stuff and Trump are two distinctly different things
Yeah.
that cannot be put
Okay.
into the same category because we're talking about economics. And yes, Canada, like every country on the planet, had devastating economic effects from COVID. Inflation was bad here as it was. We did better than a lot of countries, but it was still bad. So now let's talk about Trump and tariffs and stuff. So you can't separate Trump's tariffs and Trump's 51st state rhetoric because they go hand in hand here in Canada. And though this isn't the case across the board, for me, we'll talk about grocery shopping. So I go grocery shopping, and every single product you do a check to make sure it's not from the United States. Not because the price has gone up because of tariffs, which a lot of products from the United States have, but because we're not buying U.S. products. And that's where you go from the difference between tariffs to 51st state rhetoric. Mm-hmm. Tariffs would mean that we would just be paying more for the United States U.S. products than we are, or our counter tariffs rather. But the 51st state rhetoric, that's our boycott. That's the line in the sand, right? So when we go grocery shopping, every single product is looked at to see whether it's from the United States or anywhere else on the planet. And if it's a United States product, it goes back on the shelf. And that's not like my household. Like all of the financial data says this is what Canadians are doing. We are not buying U.S. products. you look at tourism into the United States, we are your biggest tourism driver. And we're stopping, like, not in small part. The vast majority of us are canceling any plans or not making any plans to go to the United States. So it becomes a lifestyle. But the irony is, I can't say that this speaks for everyone, every Canadian, but the irony is that my grocery bill is actually less now than it was when we were buying U.S. products. And maybe that's because of where we're getting the other products from. Maybe it's because it doesn't have to be shipped as far. Maybe it's because, there's a few less luxuries, faster, more convenient things that we're not buying anymore. And now, we're eating a lot more from scratch meals. I can't entirely answer the question, but my bill is down probably 20% now.
So I want to talk about three major existential issues that involve life and politics, and we'll go through them. I think we'll go from the least to the worst. And the first one is Trump. Here in the U.S., you have people who hate Trump and you have people who love Trump. But I think most people, one way or the other, recognize that things aren't going well in the first 6 months, and people will be talking about, he's not going to try to get another term. Yes, he will, if he's still living. But it just seems to me that probably the best thing, unfortunately, that could happen is if we had another Great Depression here in the U.S., because that would definitely get him out. Because the corporate overlords that run this country, they're not gonna take 3-4 quarters, much less 3 or 4 years of being in the tank. They'll send someone, and it's not going to be some jacked up kid on the top of a roof who can't hit the broadside of a barn. Trump will be gone one way or the other. But what is your intuition as a Canadian, or hope, if you will, how the next three or 4 years play out until the next American election?
Yeah. I'm going to. I don't mean this to be offensive. So you talk about. Okay, you're asking about how I see it to the next election, and that is what, from the outside perspective, we see as American exceptionalism, right? So the fact that you see the next election as being some possibility for change says that you're still buying the dream, right? But the reality is that, like, what would change, and what makes you think there's going to be a next election? Because Russia has elections. Putin was democratically elected, and so what makes you think that your system isn't going to be that system by the time the next election comes around? That's kind of inconsequential at the moment. That was just because you chose wording, and I understand why you did. But it's like, I hear this all the time. This is one of the things I hear in left-wing media all the time, where they choose words where it's like, there was some congressman or the other day who said something about this bill that he would like to see passed, of the 10 different changes that he would like to see to the political system. And one of them was the American Leadership Act or something like this. And it was like, that was, again, American exceptionalism, because Americans still think that at any point in the future, you're going to be a world leader again, when the whole world is shifting away. So it's really interesting times coming up. And so what can I say for what do I hope? That's a really difficult one, because that means hope in dream or hope in reality, because the hope and dream is that like somehow the United States manages to like struggle through this experience, have a great learning experience, and become an enlightened country and move forward progressively and look after your people and maybe not bomb the shit out of so many people all over the planet. That's the dream. The reality is, there are so many possibilities and layers and outcomes. Like, this is only 6 months into this show. And, from a Canadian perspective, we don't know if the United States is going to implode or explode. And first off, you've got implode. What if the United States has an actual civil war? And what does that even look like? Because, it's not like you've got slaves in the South and no slaves in the North. You've got an integrated society. So how do you draw battle lines in something like that? It becomes, and is it a like a traditional, like, we're shooting at each other, or is it that we're, using all of the technology against you, bringing down billionaires by making it so that they have no internet access or websites, or, like it could evolve in so many different ways. And then there's the explosion part. So say that this all gets, like right now, you've got all this stuff going on with the Epstein files, and Trump wants to do everything he possibly can to distract the people from it. So now he's moved the military into Washington, D.C. as a distraction from the Jeffrey Epstein files. Now, that means the possibility exists that the level of cover-up needs to be so big that maybe let's invade Canada. We need a bad guy. And so, we do see that as a distinct possibility.
Yeah, see, this is why I said the purgative that I think that would work is if there is a depression. It doesn't have to be worldwide, but since the economies are so linked, if there's a depression that really hits the U.S. and not just this bullshit of like calling it the Great Recession, which was bad, but it wasn't anything like the Great Depression. A real depression, I'm talking Dust Bowl type depression, might be the best thing. And as I was speaking, I remember I did comment on a couple of your videos. One of them was about Trump, and I disagreed with you because I think Trump is the ultimate cult of personality, because unlike, say, Mao Zedong, unlike Lenin, there is no Republican that is even on the horizon as able to galvanize that together. Remember, there was the Tea Party in the U.S. 15 years ago. We called them the Tea Baggers. They had virtually no effect because they didn't have a Trump. And I think you cut the head off this dragon, you're going to see them go back. Now, they'll come back in 15, 20 years because the Democrats are a weak feet party. But, and I'd love to see the U.S. become a second-rate power, if only so that they learn a little bit of humility. That's not going to happen because we have all this goddamn nuclear warheads there. But
so I think that again, you're coming from a lifetime of American experience, and so you're making assumptions about like progressions in political parties. The reality is that like we're 6 months into this experience. There's still 3.5 years to go.
Yeah.
And there's a couple of different aspects. So Trump, yes, I agree. Trump is the cult of personality. With any luck, a lot of different things with any luck. But if he was to pass away tomorrow, right? The Project 2025 machine is in there, which is why this administration is far worse than his first one. Like his first one was ruled by incompetence. But now he has evil and competent people standing behind him. And like, you can't tell me of the nearly, 200 executive orders since he's taken office that he even wrote one of them.
Well, let me just push back on the competence. J.D. Vance, I can tell you here in Texas, the MAGA people here, they think he's an F word that rhymes with maggot. I mean,
Yes, yes.
he wears. They would not. He's not going to be there.
But that
The
doesn't matter, because the fact of the matter is, if Trump passed away tomorrow, who is going to be the president? So what Texans think of JD Vance, what right wing or left wing part supporters think of JD Vance is 100% inconsequential, because he will be the president,
but he's not going to be
and
able to
he
move
will
anything
have.
forward. I mean, look at his Attorney General Pam Bondi. I mean, she literally is she just I just was reading today how she's bringing someone up on charges. She's trying to get this Tulsi Gabbard nonsense thing. She's trying to do well, and she did something to a judge. She threatened a judge. Now, without Trump there, and you have an effete leader like J.D. Vance, I think you would see it would fall into total chaos. They're not going to get anything done. I don't think, because I mean, they've shown it. The very fact that they can't get anything done under Trump, you remove the head of the dragon, you're just left with a body that's flailing for the next 3 years, let's say, if he died in 6 months.
Um, yeah, I will respectfully disagree with you.
Okay.
Uh, the thing is, so let's say Pam Bondi as the example. Is she an idiot? Yes. Is she incompetent? No. I mean, you're talking about something that she has done wrong, but how many people of color in the southern states are absolutely terrified every minute of every day right now? What was their goal? Like, their goal was to terrify, you know, brown people, Mexicans, Latino people from coming to America or staying in America. And so, is she being successful in that? Absolutely. So, yes, that's not a court win, but they're not after a court win. They're after what they see as a moral victory. And moral victory doesn't matter why brown people are scared, or why they're not coming to the country, or why they're leaving the country. They just care about the effect. And from that perspective, no, Department of Justice is absolutely winning.
So let's move on to the second existential threat, and that's artificial intelligence. And the thing that gets me is I am 100% on this idea that the AI thing is a bubble right now, because what they're calling AI is not artificial intelligence as we could see it in science fiction movies. They're trying to sell basically the AI that people use is a machine that guesses what the next word is going to be, because it can scan billions of sentences at one time. It's not actually thinking. It's not actually this. And this may be actually the bubble that causes a depression, if we're lucky, and that's a way out. But it seems to me this is yet another thing that's a scare tactic. It's either we've got this utopia thing where 10 minutes after AI reaches sentience, we're going to figure out how to travel at light speed and go across the galaxy, and so, or it's Terminator.
Yeah, you know what, I think that the level of competence that technology has achieved at this point certainly affects the labor market. But if it was genuine AI, we most probably would have cures for most forms of cancer within a month.
Mm.
And I mean, I don't know what your experience is trying to use any sort of AI. It's not nearly as intelligent as people seem to think it is. It's, it does have its useful place. Like I do use ChatGPT for structure, not like structure outlining my videos. I'll come in and I'll say, I have these 30 things I want to talk about. You know, what is the best order for me to talk about them in so that it's a progressive story? Because I can wander off for an hour if I don't do something like that, right?
Yeah.
But like you couldn't actually get something like that to write a script or anything like that of any, you know, you'd be talking about, hens pooping out chocolate deer, or, like, I mean, it's not that intelligent. And it's certainly not, creating the life-saving innovations that they're pretending it does. Like, it's not going to get us to Mars. It's not going to do
Yeah.
basic tasks.
And my wife is a copywriter at a biotech company, and she constantly talking about how what people say about AI is ridiculous because AI, for example, can't use negatives well. If I say, yeah, in the U.S. Along the Atlantic coast, there's a variant of the language called Gullah where they use a lot of negatives instead of saying, "Oh, Jason, you're a handsome man. You're a not ugly man," is what they would say.
Yeah.
And similarly, having a negative or a double negative in a sentence seems to throw a lot of these AIs way off. And yet these same AIs, and you see these clearly videos made with AI about robots, doing karate and acting like Bruce Lee and doing all this stuff when it's simply not so. And it's like it's to me it. I grew up in a very, as I mentioned off air, a Goodfellas type neighborhood. You can smell the scam here. You just know that the Musks and the Bezoses and all of these people, they just want to get people to invest in it. 2 years later, boom, we're going to see. Well, we don't have plans to colonize Mars quite yet. We're not going to know the meaning of life because some AI reached super intelligence. And I'm not saying that it's never going to happen. It's probably not going to happen in my lifetime. I'm 60 years old. I think maybe you'll start seeing stuff, but at best you're going to have a Roomba crossed with old Rosie the robot from the Jetsons.
Well, I think, okay, so this ties in both artificial intelligence and the Great Depression that you were talking about.
Yeah.
Um, Artificial intelligence is the same. Like, I'm sure, like you remember in the 90s when personal computers were really becoming a thing, and there were all these claims that they were going to reduce the workload, and our work week was going to go down to 20 hours a week, and blah blah
And
blah
even
blah blah.
my favorite one is it's going to be a paperless society. We use more paper now because we back up on paper.
Yes, yes. So, and then like you get to the artificial intelligence side of things, and then we have to sort of look at the bigger picture. There's two aspects. One is AI is kind of like cryptocurrency right now. Um, it's a bit of a scam, a bit of a scheme, and it doesn't mean that it's not real, but it's not real yet.
Yeah.
And it definitely, like, it could happen, but the reality is that, so now we get to the Great Depression side of it, which is that it is talented enough to take away a certain portion of jobs. It is disruptive technology. Um, Now where we get to the Great Depression side is that it isn't creating a new market for labor to accommodate that technology. And because of that, and because of the personal debt load in the United States and a million other factors, and half the population living like one paycheck away from being homeless, there's going to be a huge impact if you get rid of even 5%, and then you say, well, the Trump's got these tariffs and those tariffs are destroying businesses. That's going to be another percentage. And before you know it, you've got this whole snowball effect going on. And frankly, I don't see any option other than a depression for the United States at this point.
Yeah.
And, you know, and it's not going to be like the Great Depression where, yeah, it took 30 years, but the United States ended up on top of the world. Like, this is going to be a protracted depression, and the United States is going to have to find its new position in the world, and it's not going to be the top of the pile.
Yeah, and
So,
I think that's part of a global thing. You know, people talk about China and rising and whatnot, but China has major issues. I sometimes on my smart TV will watch the news from Japan or Taiwan or Indonesia or Scandinavia or whatnot, and they report on issues. For example, like, you know, here in the U.S., that infamously we have had Native American women disappearing for the last 12, 15 years. Some, whether it's a serial killer, I don't know. But similarly, I found out about a similar thing happened before the Gaza war started with Palestinian women. In a similar way, the Uyghurs, uh, a lot of the people who are the minorities in China are very unhappy. And, you know, if you want to talk about a civil war, it wouldn't shock me if both the U.S. And I think China, with a more recent history, could fall into a civil war too, because the way they are treating, as I said, especially in the western half of that country, the minorities there are very unhappy. Inner Mongolia, the people in there, Manchuria has always wanted to be its own country. It wouldn't shock me if China, at some point during this century, maybe not in my or your lifetimes, falls apart too, because that's hell. So I think there's going to be a great leveling out of the world powers. You know, I don't know. What is your take?
I don't think, I think China is, I think there's one fundamental difference between the United States and China in terms of like having some sort of civil collapse, which is that China is a millennia old culture. You know, it has grown, it has evolved, it has adapted. And the key word there being adapted, whether it be socially or economically, China has adapted to what is needed for the time. And they have uh, a bit of, sorry, excuse me, they're not afraid to take a bit of an authoritarian approach when they deem it necessary.
Yeah.
So that makes it much harder for there to be any great rebellion. But on an economic side, they're willing to adapt to accommodate the times. So it's not like they have one brand of communism or one brand of socialism. They have a lot of different shades of gray. And they don't just have it over time, they have it over land. So the type of communism or socialism that they have in the West isn't going to represent the same that they have in the East. And that is how a country, a society stays together over a long period of time, is by its willingness to adapt to accommodate the times. Whereas in the United States, you have capitalism as a religion. And what that means is that there's no flexibility. So when times are good, capitalism can be a very good thing. It can, you know, create a lot of prosperity, induce a lot of innovation. But then you get to times where they're more difficult, and you need a more socialist approach, whether it be, you know, the big New Deal, or, you know, something like that, where it embraced a lot of socialist values to move the country forward. You don't have that right now. Right now, it's like it's capitalism or death, and death is winning.
Well, the reason I would disagree, though, is China has never really been one country, despite what people say. It was used to be referred to as the Chinas, and I think in the last 4,000 years, they've had something like 21, 23 civil wars. So it's like every other century, there's some kind of civil war. In fact, what was it, the Boxer Rebellion? More people died in that than in World War II. Um,
Yeah.
people don't know that, but so I think they're more prone to it. But I mean, China's still going to be there when China, the U.S., Europe as a whole, perhaps they may be the tripartite powers. Russia, I think, is going down off a cliff even faster than we are, meaning the U.S. But I want to get to my third existential threat, and this to me is the big one that is totally lost now, and that's global warming. And now I'm not one of these people that thinks that we're going to have a runaway greenhouse and we're going to become Venus. But to speak of the Democrats again, I couldn't stand Nancy Pelosi. The green dream, the arrogance that dripped from that woman. I mean, Trump. I can't stand him, but she's no better. And the thing is, this is so easy. The infrastructure is there to forestall this. And what's going to happen is we're going to hit the bottom, and it's going to take a 20 or 30 or 40-year world war approach where all the countries are going to have to act as if we're fighting against, an alien invasion to turn that thing around. And I think we will. I think we will develop technologies, but hundreds of millions of people who don't have to die are going to die in Bangladesh. New Orleans is going to be wiped off the map. London is going to be wiped off the map. Or some, cities are going to have to.
I'm sure you've heard. My province is on fire right now.
Yeah,
Like
I
I've
remember
seen, I've
last
seen
year
the
too.
sun. I could count on one hand the number of times I've clearly seen the sun in the last month.
Yeah, but here's the thing: every fart Trump takes makes international news. The robots are coming to kill us. It's AI, as I said. But the biggest existential threat, and I don't think it's because of global warming, but that could cause water wars, which could cause wars, which could trigger a nuclear war. There's that cascade effect there because the nuclear option is still a far likelier end for the humanity than Terminators. What is your average Canadian? What is their view on global warming? What do they see more of an urgency than here in the U.S.? I'm assuming yes.
Yes. Whether or not they're actually doing anything about it, that's a whole other can of worms. Like, I think that the vast majority of the countries that are capable of doing anything about the situation gotta have their fingers in their ears. And Canada is not any different. Like we acknowledge it, and and that's because from coast to coast to coast in Canada, we have one of we are one of the most natural resource wealthy countries on the planet, and we see, that the beauty that we get from that because we have, you can genuinely go away and go to a place where somebody hasn't stood for 10,000 years, and if you drop dead right there, you would never be found. We have this great, forests, we have glaciers, we have, Arctic ice caps, but we see all of it diminishing. Like, the Northwest Passage, political fights are happening because we know that a clear route is going to come soon and who's going to be in control of it. Mm. And that means the ice caps are melting, which means that you have then changing water temperatures going through, all of the oceans. We have, we've been on fire for years now in ways that we've never seen before. Like, I don't know if there's ever been a season worse than this one in Manitoba for forest fires. But I've literally had days in Winnipeg where the air quality is, this is not hyperbole, I've been there, that the air quality has matched that of Delhi, India. So it's global warming is climate change, whatever you want to choose, words you choose, is absolutely real, and we see it in our faces all the time. that doesn't mean we're doing anything about it, because we are being inundated by Trump farting.
Yeah. So I want to one final point, and then we'll wrap up. I wanted to talk because you mentioned the some of the good things about capitalism, and as I've grown older, I don't I'm not really sold on any major economic system. I put capitalism, feudalism, socialism, and communism. I call them pelf economies. Everything is reduced to a number. You know, there's the old saying, the capitalist knows the price of everything and the value of nothing. I think we have, as a society, to get to, I wouldn't say like the Star Trek thing, the society of abundance or whatnot, but I think we have to start valuing people, experiences, without having such a huge gap between them. There's no reason that any human being should be 1,000,000 times more powerful or wealthy than someone at the bottom. You know, 5, 10 times, okay, I can live with that. But how do I mean? Do you think it's a good thing that we would transition away from the current, as I call them, pelf economies, to something more? What might that be? Have you any ideas?
Well, personally, I'm on the same boat as you. Any monetary based economy is inherently corrupt, and inevitably, given the resources that we have on this planet, is going to fail. It might take hundreds of years, but it's going to fail. So then the question becomes, how do we transition out of systems that we've learned where a dollar puts a value on something? You know, and I don't have the answer to that. I just know that if we don't start working towards that, we're only working towards our own demise. You know, and whether you call a system capitalist, communist, socialist, realistically, the thing that we've seen from every one of those economic systems is they all behave pretty identically. They all end up on the same path, and they all end in the same location. You know, somebody's on top, and almost everybody else is on the bottom.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, it's just where does it show up, the bad side of it? You know, even in like the Scandinavian countries, you know, democratic socialism. Well, they're still exploiting someone in some third world country that's employing a child that limps to work or something, and so you know, it's one of those things. But I want to thank you for appearing. Is there anything that we haven't discussed that you wanted to discuss? Just throw out there before we end.
No, I think we pretty much covered it quite a bit. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, no.
yeah, I will link to Wrong Enough to Know Better below this video. Anyone can find out more about you, Jason, and your channel. Hopefully, my only piece of advice, and this is from someone who only gets a few hundred views, is don't let your channel go stale. That's slow death. If you just get in a groove, it's not like, you know, you're draining 3-pointers on the basketball court. You know, keep it lively, keep it different. You know, don't fall into expectations, because I have interviewed a few people that a few years later they fell right into the expectations, and I'm sort of disappointed with the channels because they didn't grow creatively. They may have grown, you know, monetarily, but anyway, I find your channel very good.
Okay, so then I will say to you that with the channel, it's sort of funny because I do talk about my experiences. You know, I mean, there is a personal side to these videos. I'm not trying to make it a channel about strictly politics. It's political, social commentary, my life experience that brings me to views and stuff like this. And I'm openly, obviously, you know, trying to get back to India and spend more time there. And I would like that to become, you know, like we used to get the snowbirds in Canada who go down to the States for the winter. Well, I'd like to spend my winters in India, you know. But I'm trying to think, you know, I've got a substantial number of Indian viewers and stuff like that. That's great. I'm making more connections. But what does it mean when I get to India for my channel. Like I'm still going to make the type of videos that I've made, but there's a lot of, social, economical, not political. I don't want to do political with India because it's far too complicated for me to, as a foreigner,
Don't go to
to.
North Sentinel Island. I just saw about a dumb kid YouTuber who is 5 years in jail now in India because he went to North Sentinel.
Oh, yeah, no, 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 definitely not going there. But so I mean, but I want, does this mean I'm going to go out on the streets of India and show, and then like, does that mean that I'm a travel vlogger or something? It's like so the threat of becoming stale is not really a threat.
Yeah.
But I will say this, that like, I do, I don't, I'm getting older and I have some physical issues. And so my employment options, are limited. And this genuinely is something I would like to do. So I have treated it like a job, which is, you know, I attribute most of the success of this channel so far to the fact that I get up every day, you know, I think I could say 7 days a week, and I'm working on the channel. Like I might only be producing a couple of videos a week, sometimes a few if I'm lucky. Um, but I'm always approaching it as a job. I'm interacting with comments. I'm working on scripts. I have 50 scripts that like, you get 95% of the way through and you go, nope, not going to use that one, and so I'm always working to improve it. So hopefully, with any luck, my channel doesn't go stale. I just have to figure out what direction it's going in and how far I go in that direction.
Yeah, there's a gal who does a YouTube channel into the Svalbard Islands, the northernmost islands up in the Arctic Ocean, and I watched her for a while. But then, when you're doing videos on like, what is it like to have a frozen toilet, or what I remember I emailed. I said it'd be more interesting if you talked a little bit about, say, the Soviet era there where they were mining or whatnot. No, and then I remember the video that I saw that really made me laugh was she had what happens when an Arctic storm hits the islands. Well, she cut it into two parts, and the storm never happened. There was no storm, and it was like it's the same Hollywood mentality: promise everything but deliver
Yeah,
nothing and whatnot. But anyway, I will link to your channel. It was great talking to you, and continued success.
it was great talking with you, Dan. Thank you very much for having me.